Special Agent Malcolm Hayes adjusted his silk tie, fully aware that the next few minutes would unravel everything Judge Eleanor Winslow believed about power. Inside his breast pocket, his Secret Service badge felt heavier than usual, a weight rivaled only by the evidence file that would expose years of judicial corruption. Standing at the defendant's table, he allowed himself a brief, knowing smile at the irony of what was about to transpire. Justice wore many faces, but today it would wear his. In the sunlit halls of the Los Angeles County Courthouse, a reckoning was about to unfold. Every seasoned lawyer and eager young prosecutor present was about to witness a stark reminder that no one, not even the most revered judge, stood above the law. Judge Winslow, with her silver-streaked hair and meticulously applied lipstick, peered down from the bench, her lips curling into the condescending smirk she reserved for those she deemed beneath her. She had no inkling that her empire, built on prejudice, backroom deals, and kickbacks, was about to crumble. Nor did she realize that the sharply dressed black man standing before her wasn't just another cog in her machine of injustice. He was her reckoning. The tension in courtroom 214 hummed like an electric wire before a storm. Malcolm felt every eye in the room on him, studying his composed stance, wondering why he seemed utterly unshaken before one of California's most feared judges. 6 months of undercover work had taught him patience, the kind that came from watching injustice unfold day after day while meticulously crafting an airtight case. Judge Winslow's manicured fingers drummed an idle rhythm on her bench, a habit Malcolm had observed countless times during his investigation. It was usually the precursor to her most severe sentences, especially when the defendant looked like him. "Well, Mr. Hayes," she drawled, her disdain barely veiled, "enlighten us as to why you believe you're any different from every other individual who has stood where you are now." Malcolm inhaled deeply, steadying his voice with the weight of all those who had stood in this very spot before him. Good people. People crushed beneath the weight of bias masquerading as justice. "Actually, Your Honor," he said, his voice as firm as steel, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding about my role here today." The judge's arched eyebrow twitched slightly, the first fracture in her otherwise impenetrable facade. Malcolm knew precisely how to widen it. He reached into his jacket pocket with deliberate slowness, catching the wary shift of the bailiff's stance, his hand drifting instinctively toward his holster. The movement was calculated, just like everything else about this operation. "I'm not the defendant, Your Honor," Malcolm continued, pulling his badge from his pocket with meticulous precision. "I'm the lead investigator." The golden emblem caught the fluorescent light, reflecting a harsh truth into every corner of the courtroom. A profound silence fell over the room. Judge Winslow's face underwent an intricate transformation. First disbelief, then anger, then fear, and finally the dawning horror of realization. The world she had spent decades carefully constructing was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Her fingers, once idly drumming, now gripped the edge of her bench so tightly her knuckles turned white. "This is outrageous," she managed to sputter, but the usual authority in her voice wavered, betraying the tremor beneath. Assistant U.S. Attorney Ryan Calloway chose that moment to rise from his seat in the gallery, his presence adding another layer of gravity to the unfolding reckoning. "The evidence suggests otherwise, Your Honor," he stated, his words falling like a gavel stroke. 6 months of surveillance, documented patterns of discrimination, financial trails leading to private prison kickbacks, all meticulously compiled. The young prosecutor at the opposing table had stopped writing, her pen frozen midair as the implications of what she was hearing dawned on her. How many of her cases had been tainted? How many lives had been unjustly ruined? The bailiff shifted subtly, creating a noticeable distance between himself and the judge he had served loyally for years. Even the court reporter's fingers hovered above her stenotype, hesitant, as if unsure whether she should be recording this momentous fall from grace. Malcolm retrieved a sealed envelope from his briefcase, placing it on the bench with quiet authority. "Department of Justice investigation findings," he stated evenly, "including transcripts of your private meetings with prison executives, records of offshore accounts, and statistical analysis showing systematic bias in your sentencing patterns. Each piece of evidence landed like a body blow against Winslow's reputation. The whispers in the gallery grew to a murmur, then a roar. Years of suspicions were finally confirmed. Parents who had watched their children receive disproportionate sentences for minor offenses leaned forward, their faces a mixture of vindication and anguish. A mother in the back row clutched a photo of her son, sentenced to 10 years for a crime that should have warranted probation. Tears streamed silently down her face. "You have been removed from the bench, effective immediately," Calloway announced, nodding to the federal marshals who had materialized at the courtroom doors. "These officers will escort you out." The words echoed through the chamber, carrying the weight of accumulated injustices finally being addressed. Judge Winslow's final moments on the bench were a slow-motion study in collapse. The carefully crafted veneer of authority dissolved as she realized no amount of legal maneuvering could save her now. The gavel that had once symbolized her power sat abandoned, useless. As she was led away, her designer heels, once symbols of dominance, now clicked a retreat from the very system she had corrupted. Malcolm watched her departure with quiet satisfaction, but his mind had already moved forward. Winslow was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, a single thread in a tapestry of corruption that still needed unraveling. Across the room, Calloway caught his eye, and in that brief, silent exchange, an understanding passed between them. Their work wasn't done. The courthouse buzzed with activity as news of the judge's downfall spread through the halls. Years of cases would need to be reviewed. Lives would need to be rebuilt. Faith in the justice system would require restoration. But today marked a beginning, a reminder that justice wasn't just a word etched onto courthouse walls. It was a living principle that demanded vigilance and courage. Outside, the California sun cast harsh light on the courthouse steps, where reporters swarmed, hungry for details. But Malcolm slipped away through a side exit, avoiding the cameras. This was never about headlines or personal glory. It was about something far greater. It was about restoration. It was about proving that justice, real justice, could still prevail in a system that too often forgot its purpose. As he walked to his car, his phone buzzed with a message from headquarters. Another judge, another courthouse, another investigation beginning. He smiled slightly, straightening his tie. The work continued, because somewhere, someone in power was making the same mistake Judge Winslow had made, believing that no one was watching, that no one cared enough to stop them. They were wrong. Malcolm would make sure of that. Because in the end, true justice didn't discriminate, didn't play favorites, and certainly didn't bow to corruption. It simply needed people brave enough to stand up and fight for it, one courtroom at a time.